My fiance took a trip to Europe before our wedding and said we needed a break. Then she blocked me on all platforms. I called off the wedding, and she began stalking me, even showing up at my mother's house. So, Sarah and I have been together for 5 years. It's been a journey of both highs and lows, as is typical for most relationships. But overall, we've managed to maintain a solid bond. Everything seems stable. 3 years back, we got engaged. And with the wedding just 6 weeks away, all the big plans were set. We had secured the venue, decided on the cake flavor, and even mailed out the invitations. Ticking these items off our list one by one, it all felt like the natural progression in our relationship. Sarah appeared equally thrilled. She had a major hand in selecting my tux and had spent countless evenings perfecting the choice of her dress, often expressing her eagerness for our special day. However, a sudden turn disrupted everything. One evening, post-dinner, Sarah casually dropped a bombshell. She planned a spontaneous trip to Europe with some college friends. This group included a few individuals I wasn't particularly fond of, but I brushed off my concerns, attributing it to typical pre-wedding excursions. That was until she mentioned needing a break. I was dumbfounded, struggling to piece together her words, especially since we had just been discussing wedding details the previous night. A break? But why now? I questioned, my voice a mix of confusion and alarm. She responded with a troubling lack of clarity, claiming she felt overwhelmed and needed time alone to reflect. On our future, no less. Our future? I echoed back, bewildered. We're about to get married in 6 weeks. What's there to figure out at this stage? Her response was merely a shrug as she avoided my gaze, mentioning Europe as the perfect escape to clear her head. I pushed for more explanations, but she retreated into silence. The more I pressed for answers, the more she withdrew until the air between us was thick with frustration. Despite my attempts to remain composed, my instincts were screaming that something was amiss. The following morning, she packed her bags as if it were just any other day. Our goodbye lacked drama. She casually mentioned she'd call after landing, and then she was gone. As I watched her car disappear down the street, a knot tightened in my stomach. The woman I envisioned as my lifelong partner had just exited my life, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. In the days following her departure, I tried to persuade myself that everything was okay, that perhaps she genuinely needed some space to sort through her thoughts. I rationalized that wedding planning could indeed be overwhelming. However, as time passed, her texts became sparse and her responses felt terse and distant. The usual warmth was missing, replaced by a chilling formality. Despite burying myself in work to dodge the unease creeping in, my friends and family began to pick up on the tension. How could I explain that my fiancé had impulsively jetted off to Europe and requested a break mere weeks before our wedding? The situation seemed ludicrous, even to myself. 2 weeks into her trip, unsettling images started appearing on social media. While Sarah was barely posting, her friends weren't as reserved. One post by Emily struck a nerve. It showed Sarah at a Parisian club, overly intimate with a man I didn't recognize. They weren't simply standing together, they were entangled. I told myself it was just the camera angle, or perhaps he was an old college acquaintance. I tried to dismiss it as an overreaction on my part, but as more pictures surfaced night after night, various cities, always that same man, it became harder to ignore. Not only Emily, but other friends also posted videos. Sarah was consistently in his company. After seeing a video of them dancing in a Barcelona club, I felt compelled to reach out. She didn't respond. Her silence stretched into the next day, and when she finally texted, her message was terse. She claimed she was exhausted and promised a more substantial conversation later. The gnawing doubts were now a roaring torrent in my mind. I desperately sought clarity. When she did call a few days later, I confronted her immediately, my voice trembling with a cocktail of fear and anger. "Who's the guy?" I demanded. "What guy?" Her feigned confusion only fueled my frustration. "The one you're always with in the photos," I pressed, my heart pounding in my ear. There was a momentary pause before she exhaled audibly. "Oh, him? He's just a friend. You're being paranoid." Paranoid. That word again. Her go-to tactic to deflect and end discussion. But I couldn't let it go. Not this time. "Sarah, he's in every single photo. You're always with him, and you both seem very close." Her laugh was strained, as if she was trying to lighten the mood. "You're overreacting. I told you I needed space. This trip was supposed to be about me clearing my head, and now you're making it about some random guy?" Her words stung. Was she really flipping this on me? "So what? We take a break, and suddenly it's like we're not even a couple anymore?" "We are together," she retorted sharply. "I just needed time to sort things out. Can't you respect that?" I was at a loss for words. overwhelmed by a tumult of hurt and rage. She was painting me as the problem, as if I were the one who had initiated the break. Struggling to maintain composure, I asked the question that had been haunting me. Sarah, do you even want to get married? Silence engulfed the line before she finally whispered, I don't know. Those 3 words crashed into me like a wrecking ball. After 5 years, 3 of them engaged, and countless dreams woven together, she was uncertain. From there, everything unraveled further. Sarah's messages grew scarce and non-committal, and she extended her trip, not once, but twice, claiming she needed more time to figure things out. As I remained back home, the burden of dismantling our wedding plans fell solely on me. I told our friends and family that the wedding was postponed, but internally, I doubted its future. Despite the turmoil, my love for Sarah persisted. Feelings aren't simply switched off at will. I clung to the hope that she would return, that we could reconcile and mend the fractures between us. Yet, a voice inside me whispered that things had irrevocably changed. About a month into this ordeal, I received an unexpected call, not from Sarah, but from Emily, her friend who had been active on social media. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Hey, there's something you should know. My heart sank. What's happened? It's about Sarah. There's more going on than she's let on, Emily confessed. While I had harbored suspicions, hearing it from someone else cemented the harsh reality. Emily was scant on details, but implied that Sarah's journey was more than a mere soul-searching trip. It felt like the ground was slipping away beneath me. Despite the gnawing dread, a faint hope flickered within me that reconciliation was possible until Sarah erased her digital presence. One stark morning, I discovered Sarah had blocked me on all platforms: Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. My initial disbelief led me to frantically attempt calls, only to be redirected to voicemail, and texts remained undelivered. Desperate for any connection, I reached out to her circle of friends. Responses were rare. Those who did reply knew nothing of her whereabouts. Living through this silence was like grappling with the shadow. Days earlier, we were immersed in wedding plans. Now I was grappling with her absolute disappearance. Each morning I awoke to the heavy quiet, yearning for any sign from her. A message, a clue to her well-being, or a hint of her return. Yet, each day passed with nothing but the echo of our lost future. As days stretched into weeks without a word from Sarah, my mind became a breeding ground for relentless questions. Was she safe? Was she injured? Or was she with that man from the photographs? The uncertainty was excruciating. Roughly 5 days after she blocked me, I faced the most painful decision yet. I canceled the wedding. Holding on seemed futile. I sensed that Sarah was not returning. The realization that the woman I intended to marry had disappeared was devastating. The process of canceling the wedding was not just challenging, it was deeply embarrassing. I had to inform the venue, caterer, florist, and numerous others involved. Each conversation was a mix of humiliation and sorrow as I attempted to articulate a situation I barely understood myself. The reactions varied. Some vendors expressed sympathy, others were primarily concerned with whether they could retain the deposit. Each interaction felt like a blow, worsening the sting of rejection. My family and friends, previously unaware of the full extent of the turmoil, were stunned when I disclosed the cancellation. Their barrage of questions mirrored the chaos in my mind. Where was Sarah? What had caused her abrupt departure? I had no concrete answers, leaving me as baffled as them. The following weeks were surreal, each day waking with a faint hope that it had all been a nightmare. Yet, the harsh reality persisted. Sarah was gone, and with her, the future I had envisioned disintegrated. After 6 weeks enveloped in silence, just as I was beginning to accept her permanent absence, Sarah reached out, not in person, but through a stark, unexpected email. It was succinct and devoid of warmth. She apologized for the abrupt end, but confessed she wasn't prepared for marriage. That was the extent of her explanation. There was no further insight offered, no reference to the man from her travels. Her readiness for marriage was the sole issue she addressed. I read and reread the email, each word amplifying the void she left. There was no opportunity for closure, no chance to inquire about the reasons for her disappearance, or her total withdrawal from communication. It felt as though she had discarded our 5-year relationship with a few brief sentences. The most crushing aspect? Sarah didn't suggest meeting to discuss our situation. It was as if our years together had vanished into thin air. Determined not to let her closure be the end of our story, I sent a lengthy message detailing the whirlwind of emotions her absence had caused: the devastation, the sense of betrayal, the profound pain of being left in the lurch after all we'd endured together. I pressed for answers in my message. Why had she isolated me so completely? Was there someone else? Or was it simply cold feet at the prospect of marriage? I demanded any explanation that could possibly clarify the turmoil she'd thrust upon me. But again, silence. She didn't reply. With Sarah decisively out of my life, moving forward was my only option, though each step was laborious. My friends offered support, yet their discomfort was palpable. They were unequipped to navigate the complex layers of her departure, which felt less like a breakup and more like an outright abandonment. Several weeks post-email, I unexpectedly crossed paths with Emily. Her demeanor was anxious, she averted her eyes, her unease evident. After some initial hesitance, she divulged a truth that rocked me. Sarah had been involved with someone else even before her departure. The man from the photos wasn't just an acquaintance from her travels, he had been in the picture for months, possibly even before our engagement. The air seemed to escape my lungs. Emily explained that she had been sworn to secrecy by Sarah, unaware of the impending ghosting or the profound silence that would follow. She believed Sarah would eventually reveal the truth, but that never happened. Instead, I was left adrift, misled while Sarah explored a new beginning with another. I thanked Emily for her honesty, yet as I walked away, I was enveloped by a sense of foolishness. I had grieved for a relationship that had effectively ended long before Sarah's trip to Europe. Deceived, manipulated, and discarded, I was forced to confront a painful realization. I had been completely oblivious to the reality of our situation. Reflecting on the past, I can now recognize the subtle warnings I had overlooked, minor signals that should have alarmed me, dismissed because of my deep trust and love for Sarah. I had no inkling of her infidelity, but in hindsight, the signs aligned. There were instances where she seemed distant, more engrossed in her phone than our conversations. I had attributed this behavior to stress or her demanding job, yet it was evident now that these were excuses masking a deeper issue. The revelation of her betrayal sliced through me. I had envisioned a shared future with someone who had mentally exited our relationship long ago, investing precious years into a facade. Moving on was daunting. My friends encouraged me to dive back into dating, but my confidence in my judgment was shattered. How could I trust my choices when I had been so oblivious to Sarah's duplicity? Work became my refuge. An attempt to suppress the lingering ache, but reminders of her would unexpectedly surface. A song, a familiar locale, a forgotten photograph, each a spectral reminder of our dissolved bond. As the months unwound, I began piecing together my life anew. I rediscovered hobbies I had neglected, rekindled friendships that had waned, and embraced family connections more tightly. Gradually, I felt a sense of self-emergence, a healing from within, though the scars of mistrust persisted. Trusting someone new seemed an insurmountable task. If the person I believed I understood most could deceive me so profoundly, how could I possibly place faith in another? Then, unexpectedly, Sarah reached out. She had unblocked me and sent a lengthy message. In it, she apologized for the chaos she had caused, attributing her actions to a mental and emotional crisis exacerbated by our impending wedding. She confessed to her infidelity, downplaying its seriousness, insisting it hadn't been intended to wound me. Her words hinted at regret. She expressed a desire to talk, perhaps to salvage some form of friendship from the wreckage. I gazed at the message for countless minutes, caught between a surge of old wounds and the desire to leave those memories behind. Part of me ached to confront her, to spill out the hurt her actions had inflicted, yet another part urged me to erase the message and cut ties completely, relegating her to a closed chapter in my life. Ultimately, I chose silence. The time spent lamenting our broken past was sufficient. Her apology, though perhaps heartfelt, couldn't undo the betrayal, the deceit, or the profound isolation when I had needed her most. Over time, I reached a place of tranquility, learning to absolve myself for not seeing the signs sooner and focusing on personal joy rather than dwelling on a relationship that was beyond redemption. Sarah had revealed her true colors, and through this, I recognized that I merited someone who valued trust, honesty, and open communication. The foundational elements I would insist upon in any future relationship, starkly opposed to the precarious fabrications Sarah had woven. Just when I thought I had detached myself from the residual chaos Sarah introduced into my life, she reappeared unexpectedly. It was a mundane Tuesday at work. Mid-morning, as I reached for my coffee, my phone vibrated abruptly. Expecting a routine work call or a check-in from a friend, I was jolted to see Sarah's name flash across the screen. The flood of mixed emotions was overwhelming. After months of silence, post her betrayal and deceit, I had convinced myself she was out of my life for good. I had invested so much energy into moving beyond her, beyond the betrayal that had splintered my trust. Yet here she was, popping back as if no time had passed, as if no hearts had been broken. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the message. Part of me screamed to ignore it, wary of spiraling back into old turmoil. But curiosity, and perhaps unresolved feelings, nudged me to open it. Hey, can we talk? Just that. No words of regret, no attempt at an explanation, merely a nonchalant query as if we had parted on trivial terms. My irritation simmered as I stared at those words, baffled by her gall to suggest a casual chat could mend the fractures she'd caused. I didn't rush to reply to her message. Instead, I left it unread and carried on with my day, attempting to focus on other tasks. Yet, her words lingered in my mind like a persistent echo, disrupting my thoughts and dredging up past pains. Despite my desire to dismiss her completely, I knew I needed something more to move on fully. I sought closure, a finality that would prevent her from casually re-entering my life as if nothing had occurred. That evening, after hours of contemplation, I responded with a terse, "What do you want, Sarah?" My tone was cold, a reflection of the distance I felt necessary given her betrayal. Her reply came swiftly, almost eagerly. "I think it's time we discuss everything. I'm back from Europe, and it's important we clear the air." The notion of clearing the air struck me as absurd, almost laughable. How could a simple chat amend months of deception, betrayal, and emotional turmoil? Yet, unanswered questions gnawed at me, compelling me to agree to a conversation. "Fine," I typed back. "Let's talk." When we finally connected, Sarah's demeanor was dismissive of the gravity of her actions. She portrayed her disappearance and infidelity as mere hiccups, trivial obstacles we could surmount together. She framed her European escape as a needed respite to sort through her life, insisting her feelings for me never waned. "I never intended to hurt you," she claimed, her voice tinged with feigned remorse. I countered skeptically, "You blocked me, Sarah. For weeks. You vanished without a word and you were with someone else? How can you claim you didn't intend any harm?" She exhaled heavily, seemingly frustrated by my inability to see things from her perspective. "I just wasn't ready to commit. I panicked. The space in Europe helped me think. And yes, I slipped up, but I believe we can overcome this." Her casual dismissal of her actions stunned me. How could she possibly expect us to revert to our old ways as if she hadn't irrevocably broken my trust? "There's nothing left to fix," I interrupted her sharply. "You chose your path when you cheated and shut me out. We're done here." Silence fell for a moment. I could hear her struggling to breathe, likely stunned or searching for the right words to salvage the conversation. "I know I've made huge mistakes," she eventually admitted, "but can't we give it another try? I've been reflecting on everything, and I truly miss you and what we had." Her words, expecting easy forgiveness, astounded me. Could she really believe I'd simply set aside the months of hurt and confusion as if they were trivial? "No, Sarah, I can't go back to that," I responded with finality. "You made your decisions and I've moved on. It's time you did the same." At this, her tone hardened, the contrite, apologetic facade vanishing. "So, you're just going to discard 5 years just like that? You won't even consider discussing it?" "I'm not discarding anything," I replied firmly. "You did that when you deceived and blocked me. I'm done, Sarah. I don't want to talk any further. I don't want any part of this anymore." I ended the call before she could respond, feeling a strange mix of relief and resolve wash over me. Though it wasn't the type of closure I had envisioned, it was liberating nonetheless. I had asserted myself, refusing to be pulled back into her manipulative orbit. Knowing it was time to open up about these events, I turned to my friends and family who had been kept too much in the dark. Opting for the modern approach, I set up a group chat. Initiating the conversation felt awkward, trying to encapsulate months of betrayal succinctly. Yet, I stayed honest, explaining that Sarah and I had parted ways due to her infidelity and sudden disappearance. I kept the details to a minimum, but made it clear I was moving on and needed their support. The responses rolled in quickly. Close friends like Mike and Lisa expressed their shock, unable to reconcile the Sarah they knew with her actions. My family's reaction was a mix of shock and anger, particularly from my sister Emily, who was not to be confused with Sarah's friend. She was especially incensed on my behalf. My sister Emily has always been fiercely protective of me, and learning about Sarah's actions ignited her fury. Yet, an unexpected turn soon unfolded. Somehow, Sarah became aware of the group chat where I had shared details of our breakup. The means of her discovery remain unclear, but her reaction was immediate and calculated. Instead of reflecting on her actions, Sarah chose to portray herself as aggrieved. She abruptly joined the chat, uninvited, and launched into a self-defense. She accused me of distorting the truth, claiming her mental health struggles had been overlooked and that I had unfairly cast her as the antagonist. She depicted herself as the injured party, alleging that I hadn't been supportive and had failed to provide the space she claimed to need. Initially, I was dumbstruck by her audacity to intrude on the chat and attempt to alter the narrative in her favor. However, the support from my friends and family was swift and decisive. "Sarah, you blocked him," Mike interjected. "You vanished for weeks. How is he to blame?" Lisa followed, pointing out the undeniable evidence. "We've seen the photos, Sarah. You were with someone else. Playing the victim doesn't fit the facts." Emily was particularly vocal. "After everything you've put him through, you don't get to turn up now pretending you're the aggrieved one. Own up to your actions." As more voices joined the chorus, it became increasingly clear that Sarah's attempts at justification were falling flat. She continued to defend herself, but her arguments rang hollow, failing to account for her undeniable betrayal. Eventually, overwhelmed by the collective rebuttal, she ceased responding and the chat fell quiet. Though shaken by Sarah's attempt to rewrite the story, I was buoyed by the overwhelming support. For the first time in months, I felt a solid sense of solidarity. My friends and family were unequivocally in my corner, refusing to be swayed by her manipulations. In the following weeks, I began to experience a newfound liberation. With Sarah definitively out of my life and the unequivocal backing of my loved ones, the closure I needed was finally within grasp. Although there were fleeting moments when I pondered the life we might have built together, such thoughts gradually diminished, replaced by an appreciation for the present and the support system that stood firmly with me. My journey towards healing had me focusing more intently on myself, my career, my hobbies, and nurturing relationships with those who truly valued me. Sarah's attempt to re-enter my life as if she could erase the past was a stark reminder of how much I had changed. The person I was before her departure to Europe was long gone, replaced by someone stronger and more discerning. I had come to understand that trust could be misplaced and that sometimes the healthiest choice was to distance oneself from those who inflict pain. Sarah's return, rather than destabilizing me, had crystallized my resolve to move on, to author a new chapter in my life where I was the architect of my own happiness. I thought that with Sarah's dramatic exit from our lives following her outburst in the group chat, the saga had reached its conclusion. I believed she had accepted that there was no path forward for us. Yet, I was mistaken. About a week later, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I answered tentatively, half expecting a routine call from a salesperson. To my surprise, it was Donna, Sarah's mother, with whom I had shared a cordial relationship before everything unraveled. "Hello? It's Donna," she said, her tone soft, carrying a hint of urgency. "I've been speaking with Sarah, and she's truly distressed by how things turned out. She's very sorry and misses you terribly. I believe a conversation between you two could perhaps mend things." I paused, unsure how to react. Was Donna unaware of the full extent of her daughter's actions? Or did she know and still hoped for reconciliation? "Thank you for calling, Donna, but Sarah and I are over. There's nothing left to repair," I responded, striving to remain courteous yet firm. Donna persisted. "She's been having a tough time. The trip to Europe was a mistake. She sees that now. She started therapy to better herself. She's making an effort. Perhaps you could consider giving her another chance." I inhaled deeply, choosing my words with care. "Donna, I appreciate your concern and I understand you want the best for your daughter. However, the trust has been broken beyond repair. She chose her actions, blocking me, vanishing, being unfaithful. I can't just overlook that. I'm sorry, but I can't go back to how things were." There was a heavy silence following my words, and for a moment I wondered if Donna would press further. Donna's insistence then shifted to a different angle. But think about the 5 years you both invested. It's not something you can simply discard." It seemed that Sarah, her mother, and even some mutual friends wielded those 5 years like a shield, hoping it would magically nullify the hurt and deceit that had unfolded. "I haven't discarded anything, Donna," I responded, striving to keep my composure. "It was Sarah who made her decisions. I'm just trying to find a way forward." After a pause filled with tangible disappointment, Donna acquiesced. "All right, I understand. I just had to try. Take care." I assured her I'd think about it, though my mind was firmly made up. and we ended the call. That conversation was not the final attempt from Sarah's camp. In the weeks that followed, a steady stream of calls and messages arrived, predominantly from Sarah's allies, each echoing similar sentiments. They repeated the same narrative. Sarah was remorseful. She was improving herself. I should reconsider. Initially, I handled these interactions with politeness, but my patience wore thin. It wasn't just Donna anymore. Sarah's friends, including Becca, who had never particularly warmed to me, began reaching out. Despite our lukewarm past, Becca now seemed determined to bridge the gap between Sarah and me. Sarah's devastated. She cries daily, Becca texted one evening. She's genuinely making an effort. Don't you think you owe it to her to at least have a conversation? The notion that I owed Sarah anything after her action struck a nerve. My trust had been betrayed. She had abandoned our relationship without warning, and now somehow I was being painted as the antagonist for refusing to reconcile. Despite the growing pressure, I remained steadfast in my decision. I started ignoring the calls and messages, growing more determined with each attempt to sway me. I was resolved to close this chapter of my life, no matter how much Sarah or her proxies tried to guilt-trip me into reconsideration. As if the situation wasn't already taxing enough, Sarah intensified her efforts to reach out. Despite being blocked on most channels, she found new ways to contact me through alternative phone numbers, emails, and even handwritten letters. Each message echoed the previous ones. Apologies, pleas for a conversation, expressions of missing me. Each one I dismissed, reinforcing my decision to move on from the past that tried so persistently to reclaim me. The variety of messages from Sarah ranged from lengthy, remorseful apologies to brief, frantic pleas. Initially, I chose to ignore them, but as they persisted, I replied just once, hoping it might prompt her to cease her attempts. Sarah, please stop contacting me. I'm done. We can't go back. It's time to move on. However, far from discouraging her, my response only seemed to intensify her efforts. Her subsequent messages grew even longer, filled with expressions of regret and longing. She mentioned that she had unilaterally arranged a couples therapy session for us, a decision she made without my consent. This presumptuous move only highlighted her disconnect from the reality of our situation. Ignoring these overtures did not deter her. Instead, Sarah escalated her actions to a physical presence. The first encounter took me by surprise. It was a quiet Saturday morning, and I was preparing for a run when I heard a knock. Peering through the peephole revealed Sarah standing on my doorstep, as if our past months apart had dissolved. A mix of shock and unresolved feelings stalled me momentarily. Though tempted to act as if I wasn't home, I knew from her persistence that she would not simply walk away. With a heavy sigh, I opened the door. "Hey," she greeted me softly, those familiar eyes looking up at me, hoping for a warm reception. "What are you doing here, Sarah?" My tone was icy, my stance guarded. I just wanted to talk," she stammered, a note of desperation in her voice. "We've already talked. There's nothing more to discuss," I interjected sharply, cutting off any further attempts at conversation. "Please, just give me a chance to explain," she implored, stepping forward as if to close the distance between us. I stepped back, firm in my resolve. "No, Sarah, we're done. You need to leave." Her expression crumbled, on the verge of tears, but I remained unmoved. After enduring months of turmoil, I was not about to reopen my life to her just because she displayed regret. "I love you," she whispered, her voice quivering with emotion. Without a word, I shut the door, severing the interaction. I hoped this definitive rejection would convey the message clearly, but it did not deter her. She began appearing more frequently, often late at night, persistently knocking on my door, pleading for a conversation. At times, I wouldn't respond, silently willing her to give up and leave. Yet, she would linger outside, continuing her plea for hours, desperately trying to persuade me to reconsider. The situation grew increasingly oppressive, making me feel trapped within my own home. The escalation continued until one night while I was out with friends, a call from my mom added a new layer of distress. Her voice carried a mix of worry and urgency as she spoke. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" I responded, puzzled by her concern. "It's Sarah. She called me today. She was asking about you, wanting to know why you won't communicate with her. Something about how she sounded just didn't sit right with me. I'm worried." Hearing that Sarah had reached out to my mom was a jolt. She was now involving my family, pulling them into the chaos of our broken relationship. I reassured my mom, "I'm okay, but Sarah's been turning up at my place, and now she's calling you? This is escalating too far. You might need to take steps to handle this. She doesn't seem to be in a good place," my mom suggested, concern threading through her words. I realized then just how severe the situation had become. Sarah's actions were not only invasive, but were starting to make me feel genuinely unsafe. This feeling intensified when Sarah breached another boundary by appearing at my workplace. My office, located in a busy downtown area with security always on duty, had felt like a safe space. That illusion shattered one afternoon when I returned from lunch to find her waiting in the lobby. The sight of her there, so out of place, so desperate, made my heart plummet. I didn't confront her. Instead, I turned on my heel, stepped back outside, and dialed security, my hands trembling as I instructed them to escort her out. That evening, determined to restore my sense of safety, I contacted a lawyer and detailed the entire saga: her constant messages, her unannounced visits to my home, her disturbing call to my mom, and her latest intrusion at my office. Following the lawyer's advice, I decided to file for a restraining order. It was a grave step, one I never envisioned taking against someone I once intended to marry. The legal proceedings were tough. Filing a restraining order against Sarah, a person I had once loved deeply, felt like a definitive end to whatever threads of connection remained, but her actions left me no choice. She had become an unrelenting presence, one that I could no longer tolerate in my life. Once the restraining order was in place and served, the unwanted visits, the incessant texts and calls finally ceased. Feeling the burden lift from my shoulders was transformative. After what felt like an eternity, I experienced a sense of liberation. In the subsequent weeks, I cautiously began piecing my life back together. Though thoughts of Sarah and the life we shared occasionally surfaced, these reflections grew sporadic and less poignant as I dedicated myself to forging ahead. Sarah had been intertwined with nearly every aspect of my existence for half a decade, and untangling from that history was no minor feat. Ultimately, I came to understand that the person I had once cherished had altered beyond recognition. Acknowledging this was crucial for my mental well-being. The issuance of the restraining order marked the definitive conclusion to a tumultuous narrative that had overstayed its welcome. It wasn't the conclusion I had envisioned when our paths first crossed, yet it was undeniably the closure necessary for me to move forward. Now, with a newfound peace, I could finally take a deep breath and begin to enjoy a life unshadowed by past affliction.